Hello, and welcome to the Society of Professional Journalists webinar series. My name is Michael St. Serino, and I'm the Education Manager at SPJ. Today we'll be teaching about Google Trends and elections, and this webinar is being produced in association with the Google News Initiative. Our trainer today is Dan Petty, Digital Director of Audience Development for Digital First Media. He'll teach how journalists can use Google Trends and other tools to improve their coverage of these midterms and all future elections. Welcome, Dan, and I'll turn things over to you. Dan might be having some technical difficulties. Can hear you now, yeah.
Can you hear me now? Right, okay. Well, going to start that over again. So, Michael, thanks for the introduction. I'm Dan Petty, Digital Director of Audience Development, Digital First Media. We're going to talk today about Google Trends and how you can use Google Trends to help you cover the elections that are coming up. I know many of you have probably already done some of that with primaries that have swept through your states. It's been going on for a few weeks, a couple months now. And we've got some really good lessons just from that I'm going to be really happy to show you today. But just a little bit about kind of my background. That's my email address right there, dan.s.petty@gmail.com if you have any questions. Daniel Petty on Twitter. And then for your own purposes, you can follow the Society of Professional Journalists at SPJ_tweets at Google Newsnet. My background, I spent almost 7 years at the Denver Post in a variety of digital roles doing sports, social media editor, audience development, and kind of toward the end was a senior editor focused on a breaking news and trending stories team. So my background is in the newsroom, and now I work with newsrooms just all over the country on all kinds of audience growth initiatives, and part of the Google Trainers Network that goes out and teaches this kind of thing to folks. So I'm mostly going to be kind of live demoing throughout this whole process. But first, I know some of you have probably used Google Trends before, but what I want to talk through is sort of how you can do that more efficiently and effectively. And the first thing is, kind of break it down into three separate pieces. The first is discovery and figuring out what it is that you're trying to what it is that people might be looking for, and how you can help find those things. The second is the analysis, so understanding what to do with that once you have figured out what you want to cover and what people are looking for, and then enriching stuff. So, okay, well, now what can you do about that? So let's start with discovery. So how can you use Google Trends to discover news stories? Google Trends data is real-time data with data as fresh as the last 3 to 5 minutes. I should say that Google Trends data is sort of three main sources. It's search data, so the stuff that billions of us put into Google every single day through Google search, whether that's typed on our desktops or spoken through voice into our phones or tapped out on a mobile phone, increasingly tapped out on a mobile phone. I think it was back in 2015 when searches officially crossed over from being desktop dominant to being mobile dominant. Okay, so, and we've got that. The second piece of data that sort of really pulls into Google Trends is the stuff that we produce as journalists, which is Google News and the articles that Google News pulls together. So what are people looking for on Google News? What's being written about on Google News specifically? And what are the more than 900,000 sources that are in Google News actually producing? And then the third piece is YouTube. YouTube, of course, is the second largest search engine in the world. A huge amount of video and data is produced there every day, more than we will ever be able to watch in a lifetime. But what are people looking for on there, right? I mean, for especially younger people in particular, like their go-to source for video is YouTube. They've grown up with it. It's where they go to find information. They may be less likely to go to a news site than they are to go to YouTube to look for that. Okay, so the Google Trends, how can you discover stories? They have the Trending Now feature, which is looking at those news stories based off of those three things that I talked about: search, YouTube, and news. It's updated in real time. If you remember Google Hot Trends, a few years ago, you probably would have been used to seeing just a single word or phrase or something in these specific spots. But now what happens through Google's knowledge graph is that the Google looks for patterns for what people are looking for. So they may see something like this, Crawley News, Investment AM, and say, okay, these are based on all these factors. It's clear that these are all about a similar topic that people are interested in right now. So they group them all together rather than saying like, okay, this is one word that we're looking for. So how can you use Google Trends to discover new stories? You can use the Google Trends notifications to get an email for hot trends or a trend you're curious about. So in this case, if you were looking for stuff about the Great Barrier Reef, or you were looking for what things are trending in trending searches, they'll send you this. In this case, the Great Barrier Reef, this is October 13th, 2016, was trending on Google. And actually, what I'm going to do is just step out briefly and just sort of take us through here. Trends itself. So you can find it by simply going to google.com/trends or trends.google.com, and it'll redirect there. And a couple things of just what we're seeing here. The first is where are we based? I'm in the United States right now, so it's defaulting to U.S.-based trends, but you've got a whole lot of other options for figuring out what's trending in countries. This has grown substantially. If it's been a while since you last looked at Google Trends, this has grown pretty substantially over the last year or so. And so there's a ton of countries here, and everybody's different. But of course, we're going to stick in the United States. And then what you've got here are specific kind of groups of stories about specific things. So these are stories that the Google News Lab team has actually pulled together. So I could open up, say, World Cup right here, since that's going on right now. And I see a couple things in here just all about that and what people are looking for. So we'll go into this more depth in a little bit, but just want to show that these are sort of things that people are just broadly interested in at the moment. And then you've got like deeper insight stuff. So let's take a look at Trump administration, since and again, this is stuff that is produced specifically by the Google News Lab team. And this is sort of a bunch of different interesting data points. And again, you have a handful of these every year that the team produces. So keep an eye out. Usually they're based around events. So as we get closer to the election, there will be one of these for the election. And sometimes if they're major races that get national attention, the Alabama Senate race in the fall and the winter was one that the team pulled together and did something specific on. But this is answering the question: how are users turning to Google to find out more about the Trump administration? So this is search interest in Donald Trump over the last few days right here, and where the spike in interest is. July 9th, 2018 at 7 p.m. Would have been right when Donald Trump was announcing his pick or his nominee for the Supreme Court. So no surprise, like huge amount of search interest right there in that. And then you've got these pieces like top questions on Donald Trump in the last week: how old, when did he become president, who will Trump nominate for the Supreme Court, and how long has Trump been in office, how tall. So a lot of biographical information. And then you've got trending queries on Donald Trump just in the last week. So you can see some news things in here around his speech in Montana. You'll notice here what this says is it says this is a breakout term, which means that it's surging in interest. It's had 5,000% or more increase in interest over the last week than the previous week. So again, tends to go with the news cycle. Trump balloon London. Okay, who did Trump nominate for the Supreme Court? So not quite breakout term, but 4,800% increase is pretty big. and a couple other things in here, and you can just sort of keep going through, like, what are people interested in? Where's the interest coming from? I guess the Canadians apparently in the last week are far more interested in Donald Trump than we are in the United States. I'm guessing that the tariffs are probably a big reason for that. Um, of course, the relationship between North Korea and the United States has been a big focus. So again, key questions around that. Now, what can you do with stuff like this? You can turn around and produce uh, explainers about that. You know that people are looking for this information, and in journalism, it's not just about our ability. Of course, like part of journalism is, of course, finding out things that people don't know that they don't know. It's digging up stories, it's digging up investigations, and the only way that people are going to know about that is if we tell them about that because we're doing the work as journalists. The other thing, though, that we can do is that we have this whole raft of data available to us in Google Trends where we actually do know what people are interested in using something like Google Trends. And we can actually produce content that's based on that. So you could imagine doing a whole explainer about Donald Trump's relationship with Kim Jong-un, and you could start by sort of structuring a piece of content or a story just based on trying to answer some of these questions, right? And again, you can look and see where the interest is coming from. More stuff in here, the Iran nuclear deal. You can see, and this is a good example of, the technical term of something, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the GCPOA. Well, people are not searching for that. They're searching for Iran nuclear deal because in the vernacular, that's what people know it as, right? And so when we know right now just from this, like, yes, like the technical term is this, and of course I'd want to be sure to include that in any story, but I know through something like this that the phrase that they're focusing on is Iran nuclear deal. And of course, interest by country as well. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff in here. So, again, take a look at some of that. It's updated continuously depending on what's happening in the news. Let's dig a little bit deeper into more trending searches down here. So this is, again, this has been refreshed just within the last few weeks, but they've broken it down here between daily search trends. So this is that individual words or phrases. I do not know why. Well, actually, you can see. So you'll see a phrase like Build-A-Bear trending right now, 1 million or more searches. This is Thursday today. And then you'll see usually an article that explains, okay, well, why might this be trending? Okay, so here's something from the BBC. I guess Build-A-Bear is in total chaos. It sort of sounds funny to me, but that's why you can get a little more context. So it's not just like, why are people interested in this? You've got more stuff like this. And then it breaks down trends like these are previous days. So you can look at Wednesday, you can load more, Tuesday, and you can keep going and going and going. Now we can jump over here, and again, we're in the United States, and go to real-time searches, and that's where this piece about grouping words together based on potential stories. This is real-time within the last 24 hours. So again, daily. So looking at just the day's trends, real-time trends. This is what's happening right now. Things that are spiking right now. Okay, so just a few, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes ago, I got a bunch of push alerts about Emmy Award nominations and Game of Thrones and how it got something like 22 nominations. So there's a lot of search interest in that right now. Again, if I pull this open right here, I can see exactly and precisely where that interest is coming from. You can see that it's maybe not done yet, but I'm in the Mountain Time zone at the moment. So this time is for Mountain Time, so 10 a.m. Mountain. And you see a couple numbers here. The first is search interest at 100, news articles at 671, and cumulative news articles at 2,402. So what Trends is telling us right here is a few things. One, that in this particular hour, 671 news articles have been produced just about this subject. Again, not surprising, the announcements come out. There's a lot of people who are writing about it, covering it. You can see those articles here. You can actually scroll over and find them right here. But cumulatively, at least over this stretch of time, there's been 2,402 news articles about Emmy Awards, Game of Thrones, and the nominations. Okay. The last piece, and this is the most kind of critical, is, okay, well, like, what scale am I looking at here? Well, you're looking at a scale of 0 to 100. And to sort of briefly explain what this means, this is frankly probably the most difficult thing to sort of understand and about Google Trends. It actually took me a little while to kind of in my head figure it out. But this 100 doesn't mean 100 searches a minute or 100 searches a second or 100 searches a day. It's a scale. And the reason for that is that you don't get absolute search data in here. Now there are other services out there that attempt to figure out what that is, but the reason that you have to look at that and in sort of relative terms rather than absolute terms. So this search gets 20,000 searches a day or something like that. Is that and I'll show this more when we get into exploring topics around the election more deeply. Is that the number of searches that people are searching for today in 2018 versus what we were searching for in 2004, 2005, which is when this data set begins. This data set actually goes all the way back to January 1st, 2004. We just have more things connected to the internet. We're searching more. We've got a computer in our pocket all the time in our phones. We talk to our phones to do searches. We tap that out on our phone. More people are connected to the internet and more devices are connected to the internet. It's not just, in 2004, the world was I had to sit down at a desktop computer and run a search on Google and then leave, and that was it. The iPhone wasn't going to be invented for 3 more years. It just wasn't a thing. So generally speaking, we have more, basically every search term imaginable is getting more searches today in 2018 than it was in 2004. So you can't just say, oh, there's more searches today than that, because then you wouldn't actually know. But what you can do is you can look at and say, well, what is the interest in this term relative to all other terms? So is search interest over this time span growing, relative to other terms? And so we're looking at a very narrow piece right here, which is just July 8th at 6 a.m. All the way to now. And so what we can say definitively here is that interest in the Primetime Emmy Awards and Game of Thrones is at its absolute peak right here. It could be in another hour that it goes even higher, in which case at the 11 a.m. hour, that will now be 100, and this might be, say, an 80. If I go the hour previous, you'll see that the search interest at 6 a.m. Was a 20 as opposed to 100. So what does that mean? We can effectively say that search interest at 6 a.m. was 20% that of what it is at 10 a.m. Okay, so again, a little complicated, a little weird, but that just helps you understand. Like we can definitively say that yes, like search interest is greater now than it is, 4 hours ago, but that just gives you sort of a sense of what that is. And then there's related queries kind of all baked in here as well. Okay, now we're here to talk about election stuff specifically and how we can use trends specifically for elections. Well, where the power really comes from, and I should say this subscriptions thing, this is one of the things that I get. You can specifically subscribe to specific topics. I have alerts for the Denver Broncos and John Hickenlooper, who's the governor of Colorado, and I'm asking for subscribe to around these things. Like how often do I want them? Once a week or once a month? So again, take a look at this here and look at that. Let's just go back to home now. So let me give you some examples of how some of the news organizations in our orbit have used trends recently. So here's a good example of one who is running for Colorado governor in 2018. Now you might think like, how many people are going to be looking for that? In fact, quite a bit. This is this is a look at search interest actually, or page views and traffic to that particular article for the Denver Post over time. I'm looking at data from an analytics tool called Parsley. Now the primary election was actually this day, Tuesday the 26th. But what they did was they went all the way back here. The date was actually all the way back to July 13th, 2017, and first published this article. Now, how did they decide to go and actually do that? Well, they used something like Google Trends to figure that out. So how can you do this? Well, what you can do, and I've got it up here, but I'll just show you. Let's look at search interest between Colorado Attorney General. And you notice that I've got a couple options here. I've got Colorado Attorney General, the search term, and then Colorado Attorney General, the topic. What's the difference between these two things? The search term is just looking for only that thing, right? So it could be, it's only that word versus the topic is Google's attempt to try to group a whole bunch of different things that it thinks are probably related to a search and a user's intent around searching for the Attorney General. So maybe the Attorney General's name, something like that. Usually, I would say, 90% of the time when I do this, I'm trying to stick to the topic because I want to try to get, a whole bunch of different things sort of thrown in this all at once. So when I have the opportunity, I do that. So we're going to just start with the topic right there. Okay, so let's see what we're looking at. Well, we're going all the way back to July 16th of 2017, so the last 12 months. And no surprise, we had a primary election in Colorado on June 26th. So the interest in this subject for this peaked in this particular week. Now, this is just within the United States. Now, what I can do is I can actually compare this to other things. So let's actually add our governor. Again, let's do that. Okay. So I can see Colorado governors in red. What does this tell me? And again, if you ever forget, you can always click this within the Explore feature. You can always click this question button and see numbers represent search interest relative to the highest point on the chart. A value of 100 is the peak populator for the term over that time period. And a value of 50 means the term is half as popular. And a score of 0 means there's not enough data for that term. So we can definitively say that interest in the governor's race in Colorado is much higher than that of the attorney general, okay, over the last 12 months. Now, I am specifically focused on the United States, but what I can do within here is I can go deeper. So I can actually say, well, let's narrow this down to Colorado instead. Let's see if this changes anything. All right, maybe a little bit, but generally the same trend is holding. But now we're only looking at searches for this within Colorado, okay? And I can see, for instance, right here, that in this particular week, with Governor of Colorado and interest in that subject at a 100, the Attorney General's race, by contrast, was attracting about 27% as much search interest. Let's go, just since this was recent, let's actually narrow this down to just the last 90 days. Now, what you'll notice here, and this is where our strategy and thinking come into this, is that interest in this topic actually started, it was steady. There's, politics in Colorado is not quite the same thing as, like, say, politics in California or New Jersey or New York, where I think, or even North Carolina, where I think sometimes it's blood sport, But in this particular state, what is unique is that they send out mail ballots, actual ballots in the mail about 3 weeks prior. So what does this do for a newsroom? Well, for the Post, that meant producing work that, again, oftentimes well ahead of time, that just was continuously updated. Like, this is what people are looking for, who's out, who's in. And you can see this is not something that necessarily would end up in a newspaper or, in any kind of way, but it is something that they know people are interested in. And experience has taught them that doing this over time suggests that now with mail ballots, about 3 weeks ahead of time is when the search interest happened. And it was like clockwork. You could see on like Chartbeat data and Parsley data that in the evenings when people got home, they would go and they'd turn to Google to try to do research about these candidates. Now, even if you don't have, say, a mail ballot system, there are not many states that do, you're still likely to find things like this. So the hunger from people was palpable. We like to think that a lot of people are engaged all the time, of course, in election-related coverage of civics. There's obviously going to be some people who are like that, but the vast majority of people who are going to the polls, like, we're in such a fragmented media environment. We've got our Facebook feeds and Twitter and social media and text messages and push alerts. Like, a lot of people are not really doing research about candidates that you could potentially vote for or ballot questions until either days before, which, again, you can kind of see the interest here, or in the case of those with mail ballot states, it's much more even, but clearly it's like ballots were sent out, I don't know the exact date, but it's 3 weeks before, right around here, and then boom, like the spike comes. There it goes, like people sort of consistently researching. And where was the Denver Post? The Denver Post was there, giving people contextualized information. This is who, is in for the Democrats, like Joe Salazar and Phil Weiser. This is who they are. Tons of links to stories that the Post has done. So it's this like collation of stuff. I think a lot of times news organizations they're covering like the horse race piece of it. It's like development, 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 which is great for the people who are really engaged, following the story really closely. But remember, you've got this whole audience out here that's just not going to be engaged like that, but is at a specific point in time going to be interested in this. Pull together content that helps them answer that question. You can see that the Denver Post was really explicit about using their URL and putting keywords there. You can see they were really efficient with that and how they looked at people who were asking the question, who is running for Colorado Attorney General in 2018, and they were using Google Trends to, again, history was telling them, like, we know that the interest in this is going to be here, so we better make sure that this is updated and really clean to go in the beginning of June. More deeply down here, you can control and look at interest in specific terms. Interest in specific terms by DMA or metro area. So there are 3 here in this state. And then you can see what's really interesting once you get down here is like, okay, let me look at this specific topic, but what are some of the related or rising queries here? What are people actually looking for? So you can see here that under the topic of Colorado Attorney General, rising queries over the last 90 days within Colorado, Colorado Attorney General race was one of those phrases that people were looking for. Breakout, like huge increase in it. Colorado Attorney General candidates, okay. If I actually look here, let me see if I can get this to pop up. I'll just go into the title tag. Some of you may have the ability to do this, but there you go, right there. There's the phrase. So they're using trends data to tell them, here's what people are looking for, Colorado Attorney General candidates. And that's what they decided to go with, because they knew that based on Google Trends data, this is what people were looking for. Okay, if you wanted to put 2018, clearly that's another thing that's trending. And then if we go down to Colorado governor, you can see the breakout term is candidates for governor of Colorado, kind of a weird phrase there. And then a few of the people who are actually in the race itself. So the difference between, again, rising queries and top queries. Rising queries are things that are surging within that time frame, but what are sort of the top general queries that people are looking for? So be aware and toggle between those things. Again, Colorado Attorney General candidates 2018. You can always share these things. So if you wanted to write about a potential story around where the search interest lies, in this, you could have a whole story just about that, like what are people in Colorado or Michigan or Nevada or Missouri looking for, and you can embed all these things. So you can grab this thing. Sorry, I did that a little quick. You can click this little bracket thing right here and embed stories. Grab the JavaScript and drop it right in your story if you want to do a thing that just looked at search interest about a particular race over time. Okay, and a preview of what it would look like on desktop and mobile. This piece, keep the data updated, just means that it's going to live and will keep updating. If you want to, for some reason, freeze it in time, you can uncheck this box. And again, it's all interactive, so people within your article can click through and look at all this stuff. Right. Yes. And again, any questions that you have while I'm going through this, feel free to just drop those right into the chat, and I will be happy to answer those. So that's one particular example. Let's look at some other ones. Heidi Heitkamp and Kevin Kramer. So these are the 2 likely Senate matchups in this case in North Dakota. Who's getting more interest? And again, if I want to localize that, if I'm local, go down here and see whether things have changed. Okay, this is a little more interesting. So it's just back and forth here over the last 12 months, and then where the surge is as well. So again, looking at these 2 candidates, and again, you can see that the topic in this case for Heidi Heitkamp was United States Senator, could have used the search term, and Kevin Kramer, U.S. Representative. What is not a good idea to do, and what you shouldn't do, is actually compare the difference between a search term and a topic, and you can see that it tells you that right there not to do that. And that's largely just because they're measuring different things, and you could potentially be given a misleading data set if you were to compare those things. So if for some reason you can't, I know in the case of Nevada, for instance, like Jackie Rosen, who is the Democratic candidate, Jackie Rosen is actually not right now in this. They update this all the time, so I would not be surprised within the next few weeks that they have Jackie Rosen as a topic. But Jackie Rosen, for instance, the Democratic nominee for Senate in Nevada, is not in here. So in this case, you'd have to actually go and compare, say, Dean Heller, who is the Republican candidate, search term to search term. Like, that's just what I'd have to do in this case. So just something to be aware of. And again, this is not perfect. Okay. It's because we're in North Dakota. People in North Dakota don't care about a Nevada Senate race. Surprise. All right, that's a little better. So again, you can see, where is the interest for these things, and particularly like looking at top queries. You can see that some of my, in this case, some of my queries might be a little limited. Again, I'd check back here in the case of Nevada and just wait for this to update in terms of a topic. You'll get more solid data here. But some of the terms that people are looking for on that. Now you can compare up to 5 different terms here. So we're comparing 2 candidates right now. Don't limit yourself to people. That's going to be, of course, one thing as well. But one really successful thing that the Denver Post did, and I should say too, just going back to, just let me jump back briefly, like this is not like an insignificant amount of audience, right? I mean, this is, they had prepared weeks and months ahead of time, and over this 30 days, like they got nearly 50,000 page views. The same thing for the Colorado Treasurer, actually more. And you could say, well, why would that be? Well, my guess is that an educated guess is that there's a lot of people who know about the candidates for, governor, because it gets maybe an outsized amount of attention or interest from people, but they may not know some of those down ballot races, as well. Like, well, who's running for attorney general? I have no idea. So they're far more likely to go to Google to search for it. And keep in mind too, one thing about Google as well, people tend to be more honest in a search engine. Like, you're not going to necessarily go to your Facebook feed and ask the question like, who's running for attorney general in Colorado? Because, maybe that's embarrassing. Like, you don't want to be, seen as somebody who, isn't engaged or doesn't know. It's just not something you'd go to social media for, but you would go to a search engine to do that exact thing, right? And again, so I think there's sometimes a lot of interest. I know that when I was at the Denver Post for the 2016 election, some of the biggest interest was actually in, every race has like judges that nobody pays attention to because they just don't know enough about it. Well, that's where you come in from a server's perspective. I know that there are people who don't know anything about those judges, or maybe it's, some water board or dog catcher. I don't know. But don't discount those really down ballot races. Yes, like produce work that are going to help people answer the question around ballot initiatives, but don't be afraid to go into depth on those things. Like, you'd be surprised about the interest. Again, oftentimes the things that people are uninformed about and know they're uninformed about because it's not getting a lot of media coverage, they will turn to Google to find information. And you can be there. You are resources for your communities to answer these questions. This stuff. Take the time to build it out, right? Okay. Sorry, we got a little scrambled here. So one of the other things I kind of want to show is that if you actually throw something like Colorado Attorney General candidates in here, you can see like where the Denver Post is ranking for a lot of this stuff. They're really prominently placed. I mean, you tend to run up against something like Ballotopedia in some of this in terms of competition, but I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4 of the top 5 links are all, when you run this search, out of 4.6 million are all Denver Post links. So a huge win for them. Lots of exposure for audience. Again, this is where people are going to get this information. Right. What's like the basic structure here of these stories? Again, big, bold title. It's not just paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs. It's sort of like undifferentiated text. It's really kind of built in this list form. If I could make kind of one suggestion, here, If you are willing to go a little bit more in depth, that can be a good thing, just having a little bit more. But this is, again, sort of meant to be kind of a jumping off guide for this stuff. And you can see all this stuff, who's in, who's out. So they're updating this constantly. That's another thing, again, sometimes, we say, oh, well, this is a story I do for this day. But, the purpose of pieces like this is that they're resource guides and they're something that you update constantly. It's not that I have to keep doing a new story all the time. I do this once and I keep updating it. So where did this come in handy in ballot initiatives? So in 2016, the Colorado had a series of ballot initiatives called, in very undifferentiated terms, Amendment 69, Amendment 70, 71, and 72, and then there was Amendment T and Amendment U. And so what we did before that is we just open up another tab. Is we started a few months out just running through here and doing searches. Now, whoops, if I can spell correctly. In this case, we just started adding these things together. Amendment 70, Amendment 71, Amendment 72. And then, because I can compare up to 3, I'll just add Amendment T. So these were the 5 ballot initiatives that Colorado looked at. Now, I'm going to back out here, and again, I'm going to narrow myself down. I can actually go one level deeper. For those of you who are really from local news sites, you can actually go down to the metro area, but we're going to keep it statewide for the purposes of this demo. You can see I've got all these options here for how far back. I can go all the way back to 2004. You can see, no surprise, like no interest whatsoever, and then boom, November 2016, like there it is. I'm going to narrow this down, so I'm going to go to a custom time range here. And I'm going to start in August of 2016. I'm going to end 12/1. And again, I'm kind of looking at this historically now. All right. Okay. So you'll notice, like, very similar chart to what we were looking at before. But if I look at this, one of the things that I can quickly gather from looking at these averages over time is that interest in Amendment 69 on average was getting much more search interest than kind of any of these other ballot initiatives. So what this did was this actually allowed them to figure out, well, what do we want to focus on first? I've got, in this case, it was 10 kind of statewide ballot initiatives. Like, where do I start? Well, probably should start at Amendment 69, because clearly, like, the search interest in this relative to the other things is that's that blue line right here. You can see even like months before the election in relative terms. Now these are small numbers because all the way over here is where the peak of our graph is, like election day. Even these small numbers, you can see the search interest is much greater. So what do? Went in, focused on what people were looking for using trends, Amendment 69 in Colorado, what you need to know. It was specifically called Colorado Care. And then we just went in and did a really good, thorough Q&A. This was an effort to do single-payer healthcare in Colorado. A lot of interest, clearly, but also a really complicated and dense issue. And this was just a long series of Q&As. This was not something that was done in 5 minutes, so I want to emphasize that. Quality matters. That's increasingly what is going to be the differentiator. Like, I can't just whip up something like this in a few paragraphs and be done with it. And this was something where we kind of actually initially did it one way, and we got so much interest that we actually went back and added more to this, right? So it wasn't that we just did it once and forgot it. We actually added more as more questions came in, as we got feedback from the audience, and then kind of went all the way around here. And so again, this is a good, thorough article. We also linked to the other ones that we eventually would do, Amendment 70, 71, 72, all these propositions, Amendment T, Ballot Issue 4B. We could have kept going too. I think one of the things that we learned is if we had maybe started this even sooner, we could have done more. I would say, generally speaking, like this phrase, you can see like this is written like more of a traditional story and not broken out as much. I would say that in our experience with this was not as successful of a format as this format here, this kind of Q&A, like bite-sized chunks, like really meant for consumption of mobile devices, but also really informative too. So go back. And again, same thing. You can see the pattern. We anticipated that people were going to be interested in this as soon as their ballots came. And sure enough, like you could watch every night, same thing. Like all these articles that we had done. Here's where the interest was. Now, where can you also look at something about this? Well, interest in Amendment 69. Like, where is the interest the greatest? Well, clearly, down here in the Colorado Springs Pueblo area, Amendment T is getting a lot of interest. Well, why is that? Like, is there something about Amendment T that maybe affects this part of the state differently than it does in other states? So that's why the interest is there, right? So let's toggle that. Over Metro, I can also change this to city as well. Now, there's not that many in here, Denver and Colorado Springs. If you're in a more populous place, you're probably going to find more stuff. And then, what are people looking for in relation to that specific thing? So we could go in here, we could say, okay, like this is what people are looking for over this time frame. Amendment 69 Colorado. What is Amendment 69? But I mean, clearly, the difference in here in interest between this and everything else was like, this was obviously the phrase that people were looking for, so we had to structure our content to address that. Right? Similar stuff. Okay, a couple other things I just want to point out. Election day in the U.S. Is another search you could just run in here specifically, and looking at that interest over time. Again, no surprise, like you get a bump on election day. When you're looking at it on a national level, you can see sort of where the interest lies. So election U.S., like, relatively, where are people looking for? What are some of the topics that people seem to be looking at? So California gubernatorial election 2018 topic, that's a big deal. Okay, a lot of people are interested in that. Some of the topics like tops, so not just rising things. And then related queries, election day results 2018. So again, like roll through this stuff and see like what are people potentially looking for in my state when it comes to Alabama election day 2017. Okay, well, if I'm in Alabama, that's probably something that I know people are looking for. So if I'm doing a quick, sort of guide that day, that's probably a phrase that I want to use in my stories, all right in here. A couple other just last things before I open it up for questions and comments. There are other things here, again, not just about the election, but other political topics. So here's one that the News Lab team did about immigration, which has of course been very much in the news. Where the interest is, so in the United States, immigration-related searches over the last week: immigrant recruits discharging immigrant recruits, discharging immigrants, Army discharging immigrant recruits. Okay, so again, I could write a national story about this. There's obviously been a lot that's been written about it, but I can also, again, localize this. I can clearly see that around the United States, there is a clear interest in the discharging of immigrant recruits. A lot of people. So breakout term, like 5,000% or more increase. Like, can I go and localize this? Are there immigrant recruits that have been discharged in my town or my state that I could potentially write about, right? I know from this that people, this is what they want. Okay, well, we've got some stuff about the Army specifically. All right, the military. This was a particular salient story. You've got questions like this: is the Army discharging immigrants? Okay, so what's the intent of the searcher from something like that? A lot of times you've got to like also ask yourself that, like, what is the intent of the person looking for this? In this particular case, is the Army discharging immigrants? The intent there is, well, maybe somebody's skeptical about the story itself. Okay, so the opportunity here is to actually provide some really good high quality information to explain this process. Like, well, are they doing that? And if they are doing that, what specifically are they doing? A couple other things, top questions of the last week: what does ICE stand for? How many illegal immigrants does the United States get every year? How to help immigrant families? How to help immigrant children? How many immigrants are in the U.S. in 2018? And then we've got other stuff here. So DACA-related searches over the last week. Brett Kavanaugh DACA. Okay, well, why are people interested in that? Probably because they want to see that if the DACA thing makes it all the way to Supreme Court for some reason, what's the interest? So clearly a lot of interest around the Supreme Court nominee and his position or anything he has legally said about immigration before. And then finally underneath here, you've got related topics, immigration law, legal immigration, other things, and you can compare all of these things together. And then lastly, just kind of as a preview of what I expect is probably going to be coming, again, once we get a little closer to the election. This is a topic from election 2016. So this is a sense of what could be coming down the line. They'll probably break out stuff like this around policy issues. Most searched for election 2016 policy issues. Immigration was a very big thing, obviously a huge thing in the huge issue on the campaign trail. Same-sex marriage, education, taxes, gun control, economy. So again, like in your coverage plans, like, all right, well, I know there's a lot of search interest in immigration. Like maybe I should come up with some stuff that help answer those questions. Some coverage that does that. This is a look at, again, search interest in the candidates over time. Donald Trump was there for quite some time. Key moments in the campaign around debates. It's an interactive map. So I encourage you to explore this as well. Give you some ideas of what's going to be coming. The midterms are a really big deal. And there's going to be a ton of people who are going to be searching for stuff around that. This is a look at they'll do this stuff around big debates as well. So the Democratic Party debate, just search interest in these candidates during that time. Again, kind of one of those rare moments where a lot of people in the country was coming together to watch. These are all things that you can embed as well and grab and put right into your stories. So we went through a lot of this stuff just within the the live demo, which is frankly what I prefer to do rather than rather than going through slides. But you can, again, you don't just have to use this for elections. You can use this for any number of things that are affecting your community. One thing I would say is that sometimes you can get so granular on this stuff that there's just sometimes not going to be data. So just be aware of that. Sometimes you're going to back out, and maybe it's not at the state level or the metro area level, but maybe you've got to go at the U.S. level and see something. Again, some other ideas around how we can use this stuff. We talked about it already. How can trends be used to enrich your story via headlines and titles? We talked a lot about this. SEO practices are baked into the editorial operations. This is for the New York Times, with editors who track Google Trends, map out keyword strategies ahead of big news events, and update headlines as breaking news unfolds. A lot of times, like, you may guess, for instance, that this is what I think people might be looking for. And then Google Trends data or something else tells you, well, like, it's actually not this term, it's something else, okay? We talked a lot about this. One thing I do want to make clear, we've got 10 minutes left. There are a ton of training resources and places you can get more. G.co/news training. You can go there and find resources, courses, so on all kinds of things. So Trends is one of those courses. You've got other things on YouTube and safety and security and publishing and monetization, specific tools like Google Search, Google Maps, and YouTube. So again, sort of two approaches there: courses, which is a whole bunch of lessons, or a specific tool if you want to look at that. You can find out more information about this program at spj.org/Google. If you are interested in trainings from one of us, not necessarily on Trends, but other Google tools or other digital tools from the Trainers Network, you can find out a ton of information about the program at spj.org/Google. My name again is Dan Petty, at Daniel Petty on Twitter, or dan.s.petty at gmail.com. You can email me there. And then lastly, I would just say that if you have some time, I'd really ask that you fill out this survey here, tinyurl.com/spj2018, just give me feedback on how this thing went. And then also just a little bit plug, if you're getting emails about SPJ webinars, you're probably already a member, but if you aren't, please join. This is the kind of thing that SPJ supports. I'm a proud member, and I encourage everybody else to join as well to support this kind of mission. We all know that training is really important. The world is changing quickly. And what I was, a lot of the stuff I was teaching 6 months ago is already out of date. So support the mission where you can. And so at this point,
yeah, we'll just leave it open for a couple minutes to see if anybody has questions that they want to ask Dan.
And Michael, I will.
And if you'd like to ask, just go ahead and do so in the chat. Dan, I did have one question. One concern I think a lot of journalists have is about security, and I know a big push is for two-factor authentication. Are there things you recommend in terms of helping journalists keep their information safe or keeping their sources safe during the election?
You set me up perfectly because two-factor authentication is across the board you should be using it. If you're not using it, you are really exposed. It may not be that the Russians are trying to hack you specifically because you're a community journalist, but really because you're people out there who want to try to compromise you. Obviously, even whether you're a national reporter or journalist or a local one, like there's people who a lot of times don't like what we do. Protect yourself with two-factor authentication. I think I'm still sharing my screen. There was a whole safety and security thing, but without a doubt, take a look at Google's two-step verification process. I know some news organizations like ours, they actually require two-factor authentication for our email. In the case of the Clinton campaign, actually, they actually required two-factor authentication on the HillaryClinton.com email, but they did not require, obviously, they didn't have two-factor authentication on their personal email addresses. So the hackers that went after the Clinton campaign, they actually were not able to get in through HillaryClinton.com email addresses because they were protected. And they were able to get into John Podesta's email because they went after his personal email, his personal Gmail address. So that's where the vulnerability was. So if you don't have your personal Gmail protected, or your personal Google Mail, or whatever email service you're using, please do that. I kind of had a scare, 3 or 4 years ago where a scammer or spammer got in, and it wasn't. I caught it. Spammer got in early, but that's when I just said I'm two-factoring everything. So use your absolutely set this up. It's again. We don't know what's coming down over the next few months, but I can guarantee you it's going to be crazy. Protect yourself with this stuff. And again, t.co/news training. There's a whole thing, as soon as I can find it, whole thing just on safety and security right here. So if you, they list estimates for times, just take this lesson. Project Shield and Password Alert, I actually have that, this little Chrome extension up here in the corner of my browser. And what that does is it's a thing that just protects you from password theft as well. So, be aware of that as well. Is somebody trying to use your password? So again, this whole course sort of goes through that. First thing I would say, the easiest thing you can do is set up two-factor authentication on your email accounts. Set them up on your social media accounts. That includes Twitter. That includes Facebook. If you have access to other data tools, use that. But yeah, it's not just enough to have a strong password. And a lot of us don't have strong passwords. So fortify those things. But the simplest thing you can do to protect yourself is use two-step verification, which requires not only a password but also an object of device.
Thank you, Dan.
Usually a cell phone for that. So take precautions and take a look at those.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any come in. So if you have questions that you think of later, Dan shared his email. Thank you, Dan, for your time today and sharing your expertise. And thank you to all of you for taking your time and spending it with us this afternoon or morning, wherever you might be. be sure to keep track of future webinars we might have. And as Dan mentioned before, we'd love for you to join SPJ if you're not a member. And we'd love for you to learn more about our partnership with Google News Initiative. So thanks again. Have a nice day.